Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk NFT, where we talk all things Web3. I am really excited to talk to Nihar Neelakanti today, who is the co-founder of Ecosapiens, a Web3 platform that enables anyone to take action against climate change with NFTs. Welcome, Nihar.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
I'm really excited about this topic because I was born and raised in California. We're a very green state. And, I'm sure that there's a lot you can tell us about your initiative. But before we do that, to give us a little bit about your background and how you got into Web3 in the first place.
No, totally. So I, like you, I grew up in California, except I grew up in the southern part in San Diego. And, growing up, actually, I have vivid memories of actually running away from wildfires. I have in Southern California, it's like a part of life. And sorry, this is like a side note, but, I'm calling in from New York right now, and we had the whole smoke situation. Right. And that was actually very frequent if you grew up in Southern California, and it's been increasingly more frequent. But anyways, back to the story. I grew up in San Diego, went to college in LA, went to USC, and then found myself in venture capital, which, I found myself in finance essentially for 7 years and worked at the Kaufman Bellows, and then found myself at a venture fund called Menlo Ventures. Namesake is Menlo Park, obviously.
Sure.
up in the Bay Area. And in 2020, I was in San Francisco during the wildfire season in the fall, and remember waking up to the very same orange skies, growing up in San Diego. And it was like the first time, that I saw that since I was a kid. And for me, it was this like visceral shock, right? And I think for me, it was like, hey, I'm in San Francisco, work at a fantastic venture fund, surrounded by really brilliant people. What can I really do to make a difference on the planet, right? Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit of an irony, right? Once again, to be in Silicon Valley and be surrounded by all these brilliant people, and just like couldn't find any good products out there that could make a difference. If you think about it, to live a sustainable and eco-friendly life, oftentimes it means spending more money. Like going to farmers markets, right. Wearing sustainable clothing, etc. It's oftentimes more expensive, which is inaccessible to most people. The other thing is that oftentimes it requires like a lifestyle change, right? So, I live over on Union Street in Cow Hollow in San Francisco, and to go to the office in FiDi, it's a series of like hills. Mm-hmm. And if I wanted to go bike there, that would mean I'd get to the office sweaty, and I'm not going to do that. Like, who's going to do that? It's too much of a lifestyle change. And sort of the third ingredient, the third thing I was thinking about was that the best climate conscious brands out there, they oftentimes portray climate through the light of signaling and through social and community, as opposed to like it being an altruistic thing. So think Patagonia or Tesla, right? As a byproduct, they do good things for the planet, but that's not natively, why they exist for consumers. Because it's cool and it does the job better. So to answer your question, it was sort of like a personal realization and motivation to, I myself wanted to do more in climate change and climate tech, and founded Ecosapiens essentially as a company that builds products to help everyday people live sustainably. That's like why we exist. And if you look at those core ingredients that I said, like oftentimes climate action is more expensive. It oftentimes requires a lifestyle change. And if you want to do it correctly, it has to be a virtue signal, or it has to be a form of social currency. If you flip it around and say, we have to make climate action easy, economical, and engaging, if you look at those ingredients, a lot of those exist in NFTs, right? So that was sort of the birth of the idea that what if we took ecological assets, right? So for example, like reforestation or soil regeneration, what if we brought them on chain, but disguised them as digital art? Would that be an interesting way to create a product that enabled consumers to, buy a digital good that saves the world, right? And that's what we do at Ecosapiens. So we're the home of, we're the pioneer in digital art that offsets your carbon footprint.
Wow, that's there's a lot to unpack there. Definitely, what you have expertise in. What works within, the green space, or what's not working actually, and trying to repackage that for the average layperson today. Because, even living in California, where we have a lot of habits that are through, the municipalities where, you have, well, I wouldn't say you have to compost but it's there. The option is there. When you go to other states, it's not even there. So there's a lot of problems that we don't know what we don't know. And I think that you have something that can help us learn, within Web3, also underneath Ecosapiens. So yeah, tell us a little bit about how you're doing that, because I think a lot of people did either turn a blind eye or, they're just unaware. I use my wife as an example. I recruited her from Boston. She's from the East Coast. Like, they don't compost over there. So coming here, she's only been here for like 3 years, but just seeing the recycling and the composting, and I'm doing it consistently, is something I innately know. But most people, when you talk about your journey into, just being socially conscious, a lot of people don't even know what you're talking about. So how big is it? Like, how do we approach that? Like you mentioned, it's harder for companies to kind of be like a green company first, like you mentioned, and then bring product afterwards. So I'm asking you a big question here. How do we save the planet? How to make it easy? Yeah.
Well, obviously we have to like reforest the whole world, and we have to stop using oil and gas, and we have to, degrow or whatever, right? No. There's a whole Degrow movement, by the way, that I'm just not a believer in, and that, like, we can't go back in time. At a really high level, I fundamentally believe that everyone on the planet, every human on the planet cares for Mother Earth, right? Mm-hmm. It's the only planet home we've ever known, literally. And the core issue is really that people, as you were just saying, Joe, is like people are unaware is one issue. The second issue is that it's inaccessible, right? So if composting units are, on every block in every neighborhood, then it's just going to be a lot easier for you to go drop off like food scraps, right? And that's what recycling has done, essentially. If you think about it, like, recycling is actually a really easy way for you, like, you don't think about it. Your taxpayer dollars go towards a system that, picks up your, your trash and your recycling, and you don't think about it. You just throw it in there. Obviously, there's issues with recycling that, we don't need to go into. But I personally think of recycling as like a form of virtue signal, right? It's like, you buy, aluminum cans, and it's recyclable, and you throw it in the recycle bin, but it like oftentimes doesn't happen on the back end, right? Yeah. It's not really traceable, but for you, it's easy. That's why you do it. It's just accessible. And so like those are sort of the ingredients. If you can actually make it like one click easy, and if you make climate action cool and engaging, like part of culture, I think you actually get ways for people to, make a difference. Because like I said earlier, innately, we as humans do care about the planet. We just have to build infrastructure and tooling and products that make it easy, economical, and engaging. That's sort of like the thesis. The way an Ecosapien works is this. So there are things obviously called carbon credits out there. And, there's like all sorts of dictionary ways to describe carbon credits, and that's like a whole conversation on its own. But the way I'll explain it is, this is an asset whose value comes from either not creating carbon, right? So like if you're a factory like Tesla, for example, that's completely run on renewable energy, it's not Tesla factories are not emitting carbon into the air, by the way. As a result, you can get issued a carbon credit for that. The other way you can get issued a carbon credit is if you're in the business of actually taking carbon out of the air and putting it into the ground. And that's either through direct air carbon capture, which like you hear about like with Bill Gates and Climeworks and stuff, or it's through soil regeneration, reforestation, even kelp, even growing kelp in the ocean, right? Because these are natural ways of capturing carbon. So when you buy an Ecosapien, it is a unique piece of digital art that my co-founder is like the creative director behind it. What happens on the back end is, and this is all on ERC20 on the Ethereum blockchain, the moment you hit mint, what's happening is the money that you're investing in buying the Ecosapien, the funds from that purchase are actually going through our API bridge off-chain to a carbon brokerage, and is financing soil regeneration in Kenya currently. And that then brings a callback to the smart contract and then attaches those credits to the actual NFT. So this isn't an NFT that's a charity where you're donating. Actually, we're bridging carbon is a real world asset, right? It's a commodity. We're actually bridging a real world asset on chain to this NFT, but we're just making it attractive for you to buy it as a form of digital art that you can put on your wall. It's like one of those things where it's like, Oh, and by the way, it comes with over 28 tons of carbon, which is almost double your personal carbon footprint for the year. So if you actually buy one of her pieces of art, it actually offsets your entire 2023 in carbon footprint.
Wow. So that is actually something that I didn't even know how to quantitate how much carbon I put out or consume. Is that everything, like food, transportation? I mean, how does is that from the government? Where does that number come from?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Nature Conservatory actually has done quite a few studies on American carbon footprint. You can actually Google it. There's several studies out there. Sure. But the average American emits about 13 tons of carbon per year.
Wow.
Look, if you're flying more often or going on vacations or you eat more red meat, for example, your carbon footprint is going to be higher, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's why we just said, okay, let's just make it 28 tons, which is almost double the typical Americans. Mm. And so for the vast majority of people out there, if you buy an Ecosapien, it offsets every single, it offsets your whole year, right? Like all your flights, your purchases, your electricity consumption, your meat consumption, the whole thing. And that's what I mean by making it one click easy, right? It has to be easy, economical, and engaging to make a difference. And I think this is a really unique product that, enables you to make a really big difference, offset your whole carbon footprint with just a piece of digital art.
Absolutely. That sounds super simple for someone like me who just wants to make a difference. I've been 99% vegan for the last 6 years. I don't know the impact that it's making, but to your point, I travel a lot. So I'm not offsetting that by being, well, I guess I am kind of offsetting that by being vegan, but to have one click and can do that for not only this year, but maybe for the rest of my life will make me feel a lot better. When I hear tons of carbon, I can't even imagine or fathom how much carbon I'm putting out and what that means to the planet. Is there a way that you can help people visualize like how bad that is? The consumption of just one person of that carbon output?
Yeah. So if you think about a minivan, like a Toyota Sienna minivan or...
Oh, man. Love those.
You're soon to be a dad. You'll know.
Yeah.
It's... that's visually what about 1 ton of carbon looks like. So if the typical American is 13 tons of carbon, like think about 13 minivans of just like solid rock carbon. That is your carbon footprint, actually. And it's a lot if you think about it. So you actually have to take 13 tons and like store it and sequester it in, trees or soil, directly underground. And so it's a lot. It's a lot. And we don't think about it, right? It's like you take the train on the subway in New York and that still causes carbon, right? Like living emits carbon. Like that's just a nature of the beast. But the cool thing is, like there are ways to make a difference and put that back in the ground. And you're seeing, more and more ways that I think scale. I think this is one of the more scalable ways. Like you can compost every single day and you still won't be removing tons of carbon, right? It's just not possible. And so actually buying like nature-based assets like this in a really easy, composable way, actually, I think could be a really scalable way of making a really large impact in an easy way.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard, another company doing this, and this is Web 2, where I think they give you a title and they plant a tree in Ireland or something like that. So this is kind of like the Web 3 version of that, where it, you can see that the contribution that you made on the blockchain.
Yeah. So I think there's two things. One is there are quite a few of these, like, buy this NFT and we'll donate to like a specific charity. We're dealing with like carbon credits, which is a real commodity and it's a real world asset, right? And those, that real world asset has like lots of different agencies that monitor and track like their progress and things like that. The cool thing about the blockchain, unlike Web 2 methods, is that you can actually trace your impact and you can see where it's going and you can monitor it over a period of time. So like the best way I can think about the two examples is, imagine if you're in a grocery store, like a Whole Foods or a Safeway or something. And at the checkout line, they say, hey, do you want to round up your grocery bill to plant trees in, Northern California? Yeah. And you're like, okay, sure, because it's $1, but I don't really know where this is going. I don't know if anything's really happening, but you might do it just because, it's like the holiday time or whatever. You might do it. But there's no way for you to know later, like what's happening to that dollar, right? Whereas in our product, through our system, you actually see exactly where your money's going. You see the flow of funds, you see the project, you see the carbon credit itself. We give you like the receipt of the carbon credit, and you can track sort of the progress of that project over time. And so this is all, and I think it's actually uniquely enabled by the blockchain. I think this is blockchain one of the great use cases for bringing transparency to impact as a whole.
Yeah, I hear stories of a lot of philanthropic companies not using the funds appropriately. So definitely being able to just get something, even if it was like the roundup thing, they're like, oh, if you did round up and we gave you an NFT to kind of verify that, that'd make me feel a lot better about doing the roundup all the time. Maybe it'll get there one day. And just to touch upon the credits itself, yeah, there's a whole ecosystem there that'll probably take 2 hours of the podcast, but we're not going to dive into that. And I read somewhere where, companies obviously want to be green friendly. They can purchase these credits. Is there tax benefits to these giant corporations? And is there any for like the individuals like me and you?
Yeah, so there are ways for companies to get tax credits for carbon credits. This is true. Unfortunately, it's not true for consumers today. But there are several people that are working on solutions to make it, to give tax breaks to consumers. But today so the carbon credits themselves would have to be purchased through a nonprofit in order for you to be able to claim that that you donated money so that you can get the tax break, right? And unfortunately,
okay.
That's sort of the core issue, but there are people working on solutions to bring carbon credits to consumers in a nonprofit way. So I'm pretty optimistic it'll happen pretty soon, actually.
And I also read that the demand outweighs the supply heavily. I mean, that seems kind of weird, right? Like we have this big problem, but we have huge demand, but we cannot supply it. And where's the bottleneck there? So
there's basically two converging trends. So when carbon credits were invented, it's been about 25 years since the carbon market was first sort of invented, by the way. It's actually a young market. It's not like it's been there for 200 years of industrial, history. And if you think about the way carbon credits, the way to price a carbon credit, it's changed dramatically. So 20 years ago, if you wanted to figure out how much carbon was in a forest and what the value of preserving the forest is, you would actually have to send people out to that forest with tape to get diameter measures of trees, And then you'd have to use a model to figure out how many trees there were in the whole space. And then even then, you'd have to send people out every year on a yearly basis to see how much it grew or how much it shrunk, right? And if you think about the cost in doing that, it's enormous. As a result, no one did it. So that's like one element, is that it's historically been hard to measure, verify, and report on carbon credits. That's what they call MRV. At the same time, what you've seen is that in the last 20 years, the voluntary demand for carbon credits has skyrocketed. So there are like Microsoft, Stripe, Google, Netflix, if you think about it, they all buy carbon credits. They're not required to buy carbon credits by the government, right? Heavy industries are. Why are they buying carbon credits? It's because they all want to be seen as an a world positive company, which for them affects their revenue. They think that having that image actually positively impacts their ability to do business and to attract talent at their companies. And so they're buying lots of carbon credits, right? And so that's actually what's driven up the demand. So you have like a lot of demand now for carbon credits that still have, slightly old age ways of undergoing MRV for these carbon credits. And so you have like, now there's new technology. So now you have like drones with like LiDAR technology and like real-time satellite imagery plus artificial intelligence that's able to rapidly, determine the cost of carbon, determine like the value of, carbon sinks and things like that. And that's changed a lot. So you're seeing more and more supply come onto the market, but the demand for it is just, it's multiples what the availability is. And so that's the reason why you're seeing carbon multiply dramatically in price.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not attuned to the pricing of it. I was just curious if with all this big demand, if we're able to move the needles, let's say we supply all the demand right now, like, is that going to help us in any way in terms of climate change?
Yeah. Was also related to pricing. So people think that so the price per ton of carbon today is about it's between $60 and $80. That's about what it is today. A lot of people believe that if it gets to $200 per ton, which it's trending in that direction, then that actually makes large scale carbon capture a really attractive industry. Because at $200 a ton, then you have companies that are pulling carbon out of the air using fans, for example. Then those business models start to become way more economically viable and way more scalable. So I can see a world where there's $1 trillion industry in just carbon capture. And it is related to price being a certain, reaching a certain economic attractiveness point. I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but
I think you did. I think for the listeners is just how they quantify it. And I think Elon Musk gave a good example. He went on to, I think it was shareholders meeting, and he said about $10-20 trillion in the entire world is what's needed today to bring us to net zero in terms of, carbon output. And I found that fascinating. So it kind of goes along the line of what you're saying. If this becomes $1 trillion, investable vehicle, that we can really solve some issues here. And they were asking Elon the same question, well, why don't we just do it now? And it's just hard to sequester all these, governments and countries to really put out the 30 trillion that's needed, or 20 trillion, whatever the number was that Elon was saying to, build those wind tunnels, build those greenhouse, battery plants and whatnot. So yeah, I hope we get there. I hope you get there. I hope Ecosapiens helps us get there. Because it sounds like we are sort of moving in the right direction, even though the new generation thinks it's hopeless. I just watched an Obama talk yesterday of how, we're trending in the wrong direction, obviously, but we have to do something because, it's just going to get worse. But I think that projects like yourself really help us to learn and something that I read on your website was Impact-to-Earn. I mean, that's a new one. We always, we see so many different things in Web3. But yeah, maybe you can just tell us about that, Impact-to-Earn.
Yeah. No, it's at a high level, Impact-to-Earn is just this inquiry we had, which is there an incentive structure we can create using blockchain and NFTs to enable consumers to make repeated impact? So not like the one-time donation or the one-time, a year that you do choose to make a difference and donate or whatever. Is there a way to get a repeatability, empower users to repeatedly make positive, world positive behaviors like compost more, for example, or world positive transactions? And so the idea for that was that, with our initial collectible offering, the incentive structure was the more carbon you sequestered, the more your Ecosapien grew and the more unique traits and rarities it would attain. And so it was this experiment in okay, you have your main character and it's relatively simple, but in order to get it to be this really cool, interesting character, you actually had to invest more carbon into it. And that was the experiment we ran. And I think it did really well. There were quite a few people that, showed up every week on the week to infuse more carbon because it's hey, I want the next trait. I want the next, element of this thing. And so there was gamification to it. But I think this thesis of Impact-to-Earn, I think it exists, beyond obviously this creative lens. It's I've been thinking about how you can use tokenomics to incentivize people to, make sustainable purchases on the internet, right? Are there a way we can use tokens to help you reduce your red meat consumption, right? Maybe there's a way for that. And I think tokenomics can be really interesting in that lens.
Definitely. I personally haven't seen something that I utilize in the Web3 as of today in terms of tokens on a daily, not even a daily basis, maybe a quarterly basis. But I believe there's a use case for it 100%. I have redeemed a ton of, good benefits from tokens. Just repeatedly, I haven't seen. I mean, it's new, right? The use case for it's only been NFTs. 2020 is when everyone started looking at it. But I think to your point, there is something to really attract the layperson to not only Web3, but to help with climate change and give back on a repetitive nature. Just like you mentioned, I, for one, would love to do that. For myself, my wife, and my future kid, just knowing, how much 13 Toyota Siennas of carbon that we're putting out there, I would like to kind of wheel that back for karma purposes. And I think something that I love about Web3 is having just, even though I'm not an owner, let's say, but just having some ownership. That's what all Web3 is about, right? Being able to read, write, and own, right? And I like what I'm seeing in terms of Ecosapien. And maybe we could do something more, or you, I'm sorry, I'm talking like I'm part of the company, but something that's gotten me really active in Web3 is just voting mechanisms, like, to be honest, like DAO. So I see that you're working on a climate DAO. And for me, being part of projects, when I able to have a vote and able to maybe to propose something, it actually makes me feel part of that company and its journey. And of course, if I buy with this mission. Can you tell us a little bit about, Climate DAO and maybe some thoughts, what you're thinking about there?
So we have an informal DAO right now, in a sense that if you own an Ecosapien and you've fully invested carbon into it, we do give you a preview into like a roadmap or a product strategy. It's almost like you're in the boardroom with us, right? We try to create that experience for people that have shown proof of impact in a sense, right? The climate DAO that I've articulated, like in our white paper, we're still a long ways away from that. But the original idea was that, what if it was like an investment DAO that, pulled together capital for the specific intent of, supporting initiatives in the real world that make our world better. So, if we had like a treasury of like $10 million, right? And I'm just making this up and just, coming up with numbers. But, there's a hurricane in, the East Coast, right? Or some part of the world. And the group together could vote and say, hey, we're going to send like 5% of the treasury there, right? Or, hey, maybe we need to invest some of this into like an endowment that gets us XYZ return so that we can continue to grow a climate fund. Maybe we can do that. So for me, the thinking on the climate DAO was really that it would be like an investment or an activist fund, right? So we want to support some type of activist cause. Like everyone in the DAO could now like raise their hand and say, yeah, we're going to go send some people to protest, like this, whatever. And that was the thinking about it, right? It's like using blockchain, the DAO structure, to with capital to empower the group to make a real world change, which is kind of really interesting.
Yeah, I found DAOs very useful actually, and actually moves the needle for some projects. The one that bought a soccer team in Europe, and Noun's DAO has been the most amazing one. $53 million. They just came out of a movie. And I think the way they're launching is very unique, one a day. I think that's something that Ecosapiens easily big companies would purchase. I'm just really excited about all the possibilities that, having a DAO would empower. I would love to be a part of that. Oh, let's buy a hectare of forest and something that I could actually see and be a part of, right? Versus we donate a lot of money, but you just never know where it goes. Like you said, you don't know how tall your tree goes. It's tough to, I wouldn't say tough, but like you said, when you want people to come back, to help change the climate, I'm excited to think, things that Ecosapien can definitely help improve upon what's not working in the Web2 land.
I'm super excited about the future of DAOs and blockchain and NFTs and climate action. I'm very excited about it. Also,
I know we cover a lot today, but I guess we can wrap it. I mean, we could talk for days because we're both from Cali. I was born and raised in California, so I can talk about sustainable energy, climate change for days. But yeah, tell us what's next. I read Metaverse. I saw eco cards. I saw climate art. I mean, there's a lot of things that you guys are working on. So yeah, what's next for you guys?
So Ecosapiens, like I said earlier, our mission is to just build products that give everyday people a way to make a difference on the planet. What we are doing and what we're leaning into is we're just the home of digital goods that sequester carbon. And that form factor of that digital good and the form of impact can keep changing. It's kind of, I kind of visualize like a game screen where you're picking different digital goods, pairing it with different types of impact. But we're just the center, of gravity for, digital art that makes the world better. And so we have, other drops planned at various different price points, various different characters in our universe. We have some collaborations in the works with also some exciting both impact groups, but also other folks in the NFT space. And then we're actually, working on, our corporate product, which will be kind of like a different segment. Mm-hmm. That will, we have a pilot that we'll be able to announce pretty soon, actually. So, core idea, and I've written about this is making corporate collectibles. So, commissioning pieces for companies, actually, carbon art pieces for companies. So it's going to be interesting. I can't talk too much about that right now, but, if you look at the kind of way we're going, it's like more consumer drops and more enterprise partnerships and enterprise product. And it all ties back to us just being the home of digital goods that save the planet.
That's amazing. How do we help you right now? I imagine buying on a secondary doesn't help. Do we mint at Ecosapien, or do we just buy it on a secondary market?
So you can actually, for our alpha collection, you can actually go to OpenSea and look up Ecosapiens Ecogenesis collection. You can pick up a chrysalis, which is, it's just it has no rarities. It's kind of like the egg, so to speak. You can buy one, and you can go back to ecosapiens.xyz, to our platform, log in, and then you can actually infuse it with carbon and turn it into a real Ecosapien. So you can actually still do that today. The other way to plug in, which if you without needing to infuse carbon or buy an NFT, just be a part of our community. It's a totally open community. Follow us on our Twitter, which is at EcosapiensXYZ, on our Instagram, which is at Ecosapiens, and on our Discord, which you can find on our website and those channels as well. You can also just say hi to me, honestly.
Absolutely. But I'm going to tell people to buy an NFT and infuse it with carbon, because that's what I'm going to do for myself. Because this is a real problem. This is a really meaningful project, might I add. And definitely I wish all the best for you guys in the next coming months, navigating the space. I know you guys will grow so much. So I'm super excited to have you on and to have you on in the future to talk about, the progresses. That'll be amazing. I'll make sure to put the links for everything that we just talked about down below so people can find you, connect with you, the community, and also get an Ecosapien NFT for sure. Awesome, Nihar. It was amazing having you on, and we look forward to next time you come back on.
Thanks for having me on, Jen. I'm looking forward to seeing your Ecosapien.
Awesome.